student, I learn what is taught years and years before me. My role, more or less, is to be able to learn, process, and apply the teachings that were developed by historians and my predecessors. I find that my role as a woman is to do pretty much the same thing. Every generation is passed down what I like to call this metaphysical textbook of the girl or the woman. For something that's not very tangible, I must say it is very comprehensive. And it has a section for everything. How to be a girl, how to not be a girl, how to raise a girl, and how to treat a girl. So there's something in this conversation for each one of us. But when I was about 8 years old and came across this textbook for the first time, it was this first chapter that mattered to me the most. The how to be a girl, because that magical stage of womanhood was imminent. Now, 9 years later, I'm a woman. And I'm standing here on the stage after studying and loving and questioning and even hating this textbook, this being a woman dogma. And I would like to share with you some of the things I have learned as a girl and as a student, navigating her way through generations of lessons. I started my journey with my grandmother, or as I call her, my nani. For the longest time, I knew her as this loving person who wanted to feed me 15 plates of food every time I came over to her house. But of course, that wasn't all there was to her. But she never felt comfortable to tell me anything more herself. So I did some digging. When my nani was 19 years old, she was obligated to get married under an arranged marriage, which is an agreement in which the bride and the groom are selected by individuals other than themselves. She was 21 when she had her first daughter, 22 when she had her next. At this point, my grandfather was adamant on wanting a son for their next child because it was a more reverable accomplishment than the 2 daughters he had. Eventually, they did get their son. But first, my grandmother was forced to abort her baby twice in the fear that it would be a girl. When they did get their son, my nanny was 25. And as you can assume, my grandfather, the patriarch, grew up to love his son and pass on the family business to him, while willfully alienating his wife and his 2 daughters. He was the breadwinner of the family, and that brought the sense of power, where he would sometimes make my nanny plead every week just so she could have money to pay off childcare and household expenses. To me, when I heard this, the message was clear. Women were supposed to serve men. Being submissive, silent, meek were these patriarchally glorified behaviors because then it was easy to convince women of their duty to fulfill male desires. If they wanted kids at 21 and dinner at 8 o'clock, then that's exactly what would be done. If they wanted to run a business, have a mistress, get their house cleaned, and their kids looked after, then that too shall be done. Most importantly, with a big, beautiful smile on their face. That's the important part for women. That doesn't look like a happy woman, does it? When I got my nanny to open up and share her side of the story, she was telling me everything, but between every 2 sentences, she kept saying, "That was fine, it was normal. What do I say?" What could she say? As much as I hate to admit it, nothing. There was nothing else to say because at the time, there was no other choice. Duty over desire was normal. Male dominance over female devaluation was normal. And being submissive, silent, and meek were these patriarchally glorified behaviors because at the time, women's opportunities were encumbered towards society. The male-dominated society deemed acceptable and normal of them. Eventually, my grandfather left the house and left my nanny to raise 3 children on her own, which he did and still does to this day with love, vigor, and commitment. If society had proclaimed women were dependent on men, she showed me firsthand that that is not true. Women are confined to a position to be dependent on men, financially and otherwise. Women are encumbered by men to seek help when they don't really need it, but feel ashamed to ask when they really do. But it is often in these adverse scenarios where women realize their silence is really compliance. Struggle is their only way out. They can't bear to watch people scapegoat their stories as they bear the brunt of physical and verbal abuse. So they muster up the courage and find the strength to be able to say the words, "Time's up." This was where women were able to come together as a collective in 2018 and find that courage, find that voice. And this is one of the first steps that women must take, but arguably one of the hardest, because it involves the not a girl section. We need to speak up. That's not what girls should do, apparently. But that's when the next generation had to come and tell us this is not true. That while there were some things maybe this textbook was right on, there were definitely some things we needed to unlearn. And that brings me to the next person, my Masi. She's my aunt, but I used to call her my Masi. And she was a woman who grew up in a household with a patriarchal dominating father, the same one I was talking about earlier, who would only look at her for two things, the clothes she wore and the boy she dated. In fact, there were many people who would only give attention to those two things, but it never fazed her. If it would make her happy, she would wear the boldest lipstick or the bustiest top or had a relationship with whomever made her happy because that was her choice. And she knew it was easy for anyone to make a comment or make a judgment, but harder to be who you want in spite of that. I've seen this woman live her fullest and happiest life untethered by expectations, but moreover encourage others to do the same. As long as we're talking about women uncovering confidence within themselves, I should bring up one more person. My other grandmother, my ma. She was a paragon of bravery and courage packed into this one energetic little woman who, like my nanny, just wanted to keep feeding me. But behind all that bravery and behind all that energy, there was struggle. When she was 3, she lost her mother and her father ran away. So she had to shift into her aunt's house where was basically raising herself and her 2 brothers. She wanted to become a practicing homeopathic doctor, which she did, and she worked hard towards it. But around halfway through her course, she had to drop out because unfortunately, there was not enough money for everyone in the house to succeed. And she wanted her brothers to, even if it meant she couldn't. There was a happy ending, though. Eventually, she married the love of her life, had 2 children, and has never felt an inch of remorse for the role she plays as a mother and grandmother. At least, she never showed it. Because she embodied the first 2 traits that we were taught by women, that we must persevere and sacrifice, while the second generation came and taught us that we must be confident and liberate ourselves from unreasonable expectations. These 2 beautiful women who I've just spoken about, my Masi and my Ma, are no longer here with me or my family anymore. But in their admirable lifetimes, they showed me what I needed to learn by living by example. They showed me why women keep fighting for freedom, for opportunities. Because as we unearth new layers to this movement, we realize that we are more capable than what is assumed of us, and we have the right to more than what is given to us. So we must keep fighting and live a brighter future that these women forged for us. That brings us here to the present day, where now the words feminism and women's rights and equality and patriarchy are incessant in everyday conversation. What's interesting, though, is as we keep talking more about women and supporting women and everything women-related, it's becoming synonymized with hating men. When did that happen? Before, when I used to talk about feminism or feminist, or call myself a feminist in front of my friends, especially those who identify as males, they would feel disturbed by the word, let alone the conversation. But then that begs a bigger question, doesn't it? How can we talk about effecting meaningful change in the way in which we treat each other by excluding one half of the population? The question is redundant, because we can't. We have tried to exclude one half of the population before, women. And clearly, that didn't work out. Otherwise, I wouldn't be here talking. So we're not going to repeat our mistakes, because we know that gender equality is a man's issue, too. Strange as this may sound, this reminds me of the time I made my dad cry. A lot. And there he is crying again. And I was 10. I said something very moving, much like the speech, and I had this squeaky, childlike voice that brought my dad and my brother to tears. And in that moment, I'm thinking, wow, this is the first time I'm seeing them emoting to this degree and crying. And that's because maybe it was a parent trying to protect their kid thing all these years. But for the first 10 years of my life, they kept trying to show me strength and bravado, which was great. But now that I was becoming a woman, I no longer needed that. What I needed was for them to feel so I could. And I'm grateful that I can, because now they do too. But the point is, they once couldn't. Of course, they felt, but they were never able to express it. And that is due to these ideas of what we call toxic masculinity that have compelled men to be strong, dominant, and brave at all times. In other words, disconnecting them from their emotions and treating any sign of emotion as a weakness. In prescription to prove their manhood, their physical and mental health is neglected. Where if a man cries, they're a wimp. If they wear earrings and skirts, they're girly. Or if they don't want to engage in locker room talk about sports and politics and objectifying women, they're cowards. But it doesn't make sense, does it? Because like we said, we can't exclude one half of the population. This is because oftentimes we have treated these two sexes as antithetical, binary, that you can only be this or you can only be that. There's no between. But what if you want to be between? What if you want to be a man who cries, a girl who does sports? There should be space for all of us. And it took some determined voices to be able to say that it is finally time we see gender on a spectrum. All this means is that there's space to be whoever you want. There is no this or that. You can be whoever it is you want to be. And that is something we added. The third generation. Because we realize this patriarchy is upholding norms and behaviors that are neither desirable nor feasible and are leaving everyone in the process to suffer. Everyone. So let us not delineate choices, careers, clothing by our gender. Let us include everyone in this conversation, all genders, all races, all body types, all religions. Because as we keep transcending the boundaries of our discussion, we realize the more groups we look at, the more sexism and inequality pervades. Hence, it is time for intersectional conversations. A couple of weeks before I decided this was something I wanted to speak about, I remember talking to my mom. And she was telling me her thoughts on feminism, and I was telling her my thoughts. And we weren't often coming to an agreement. But that's okay, because as we see here, each generation has their distinctive understanding of womanhood. But where we did come to the agreement was in realizing the fact that women are made to feel privileged to have their decisions respected or their rights granted. But after so many talks, so many women fighting, so many movements, it's about time we should just have them. Full stop. But the truth is, not that optimistic, because we're not there yet. Things aren't going to change the minute I'm done speaking, as much as I would wish it to. I'm still going to feel a little bit scared if I have to go out on the street alone, or if I'm standing in an elevator with just men. The part of me that wants to be confident in the name of progress is scared. And I think all of us here are scared. Most of us are scared of change. Change from what was, to what is, to what can be. And that's the beauty of feminism, or gender equality, or whatever you want to call it. That it's an incomplete state of discussion. This is not a complete conversation. And that's the beauty of it, as long as we are able to keep an open mind and learn. It's not about looking at a grand scale and trying to change the world through feminism or equality, but simply being able to look at the person sitting right next to you or the constant presence in your life and ask yourself this: am I treating them with respect and dignity? Am I treating them to be a person of many things, to be whoever it is they want in this world, and not just the confines of one rusty old textbook? So, whenever we're thinking about feminism, or whenever we're thinking about equality, we realize that we're all students in this process. Like I said in the beginning, I'm a student, and we all are. So we need to learn from the past and the present and whatever future generations may tell us. But also, as I said in the beginning, I'm a girl. Now, not all of us here are girls, and that's a good thing too, because it means we don't have to be women to speak about women's rights. We don't need to be men to speak on men's rights. We just need to be humans and speak for equality. Thank you.